I did have a little introduction plan, but he stole it. What's all that about? So yeah, that's all true. My name's Andy Braye. I'm 29 years old now, and I'm from Middlesbrough, just down the road, where it's nice and sunny. Not. So when I left school at 16, the same age some of you guys are now, in the same position that some of you are now, I decided I was going to join the Parachute Regiment, which is an elite infantry regiment in the British Army. And to join as an adult soldier, you have to be 16 and 9 months old. My first day there during training, I was 16, 9 months and 2 days. So I was old enough by 2 days to join as an adult soldier. There were 74 hopeful recruits who started with me on day one, myself being one of them. And I was one of the 17 who remained 6 months later, after all that arduous training. Like was already said, I went to the 3rd Battalion, the Parachute Regiment, where I served for 4.5 years. I've done very many interesting things during that time, one of which being a tour of Iraq in 2003, when the war was on, when I was just 19 years old, and I'll just tell you a little bit about that later. I already, as has been mentioned already, I joined the Red Devils 314, age 20, and progressed very, very quickly. I was, within 3 years, a jump master on the team. I achieved all the qualifications and skydiving achievements that I ever wanted to achieve. I overtook a lot of people in the Red Devils that had joined before me, and within 3 years I was leading those guys on parachute displays. Many of those were actually 10 years older than me or more as well. And like was already said, by 25 I completed almost 2,000 jumps, uninjured, luckily, which was always a bonus. So that's a little bit about my background, and on the photo behind is actually myself on the far left hand side during my time on the Red Devils, on one of the formations we built during training. The best achievement of all was in 2007 when I was awarded the Outstanding Red Devil of the Year for my achievements that year, and I was voted for that award by my peers in 2007, which was a massive honour to me. If you don't believe me, there's a photo of a guy there with a very large nose who looks a lot like myself in a red jumpsuit. And I actually get to meet General Sir Mike Jackson as well there on the far left hand side, which was a massive privilege and honour to me. So that's a little bit about me and my background, but the reason we're here tonight is for you guys who have just left school. And you know, the truth is, the prospect of the future can be quite scary for us. What's next? What the unknown? What's going to happen next? What's my future hold? If we're honest with ourselves, it can be scary. It's exciting to leave school, but it can be scary as well. And that's what I want to talk about tonight, is how you can overcome some of your fears. And I'm just going to use 3 very quick stories from my life. They're true stories, in case you're wondering. They're very different stories, but they are true, and they are, you know, my real stories, and I'm going to show a couple of video clips as well. And just show you a couple of ways that I've learned to be courageous, and how you can be too. There's no point me just standing up here talking about myself and you take nothing away from it. So the first way you can be courageous is actually, first of all, very simply, popping your hand up and saying, admitting that you're afraid. We all have fears, that's the truth. The first step to being someone who's courageous is someone who can put their hand up in front of people and say, you know what, I'm afraid, I have this fear. Someone who's courageous is someone who can overcome their fears. If you don't have any fears, or you say you don't, then you're going to have nothing to overcome anyway. There's no courage in that. So the first step is to admit it. I remember when I was 17 years old, I'd just passed the 6 months of basic training to become a paratrooper. And the very last thing we had to do before we were awarded the Maroon Beret of the Parachute Regiment was the military jumps course. So for my first ever parachute jump, I was 17 years old, military parachute jump. And it's not so much about the parachuting itself in the parachute regiment, it's more about the infantry soldiering. The parachuting is just a means of getting onto the battlefield. So the parachute isn't that fun, it's not that glamorous. The parachute equipment itself weighs a lot. The main parachute that you wear on your back weighs around about 40 pounds in weight. Then you have a reserve on your front which weighs about 20 pounds in weight. So that's just the parachute equipment, that's just the life-saving equipment. But then you need a big container, which is what you're going to use when you land, to live with, to fight with, it's got your food in it, your ammunition, your weapons, your equipment, spare clothes, sleeping bag, all that. And that gets strapped to a giant container on your leg like this. And that can weigh anything up to 100 pounds in weight. So all in all, strapped to your person, and I'm not that big, I'm only 11 stone, and all of that adds up to about 11 stone. So it's like me putting myself on my back again and jumping out of an airplane at 800 feet. It's just mental. But that's what we did. And I remember my first one. We get hooked up with all this equipment and we make our way onto the C-130 Hercules aircraft. I'll show you a video in a minute about what it looks like. We get strapped down and sat down and strapped in. The aircraft takes off and it's flying around really fast and banking, really steep. I'm sure the pilots had it in for us or something. And people being sick in bags and all that kind of stuff. And then at the appropriate time, the door crew will say, okay, stand up and check equipment. So we do just that, we stand up and try and stand up with all this equipment on. Check our equipment, check the guy in front, make sure the back of his parachute hasn't been knocked. And then we hook our parachute up to the static line of the aircraft. So coming from the back of our parachute is a line which attaches to a point in the aircraft so that when we jump out, it pulls the parachute open for us automatically. So we do that. Then the next thing he says is action stations, which is just getting ready for action. And for my first ever jump at 17 years old, I was number 1 in the door. I was the first one out. So I make my way towards the door. And what happens is there's a big line of people like this behind me, and the door is about here, the side door, because we jumped out the side doors, okay? So I'm like here like this with all my equipment on. I've got one hand on my container, and one hand on the static line like this. So I'm in my action stations. And the next thing that happens is the door crew opens the door, slides it open from bottom to top. And then it's just like a feeling that I can't describe. The wind starts to come in, it gets unbelievably noisy, and everything just starts to blur. And then the next thing he says is in the door. So I make my way forward, I'm 17, make my way forward, I give the door crew my static line, and I turn into the door like this with all that equipment on. And I'm literally now standing on the edge of the door of the aircraft, my toes literally hanging outside, 800 feet below is the ground, and I can see all the green, all the sheep and all the cars and all that. Put my hand on the door and I think to myself, didn't look like this in the brochure. So the two lights are off at the moment, there's a red light and a green light and they're both off. So then a red light comes on and he shouts, red on! And you're just thinking to yourself, what is happening? It's like the scariest traffic lights you can imagine. And then the green light comes on. Do you think I was afraid? Then the green light comes on and he just says, go. And then you just put one foot in front of the other and just leap out. Now I can't possibly describe what that feels like. It would be a waste of time because I can't. But the aircraft's flying that way at about 100 miles an hour. So as soon as I step out, I just go this way at like 120 miles an hour. You know, the first thing you need to be courageous is actually admit that you have fears.